Well, it is 1:30, so should go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is James Major, and I'm the National Rivers Project Coordinator for RMS. And today we are doing our roundtable on water trail management, organizational structure, and partnerships, part of our What is a Water Trail series. And today we have panelists Jack Henderson from the French Broad Paddle Trail, Sarah Hippensteel Hall from the Miami Conservancy District, and Christina Hassel from the Trust for Public Lands. And we'll get to meet them in just a couple of minutes. So we do those river management roundtables on the second Tuesdays every month. And we host these virtual conversations with professional river, greenway, and water trails leaders, planners, managers, whose community, region, state, and federal river will benefit from the experience of peer-to-peer sharing. Our goal is to facilitate an open forum to support your work managing rivers. We work together to tackle common issues by asking questions, sharing solutions, and building camaraderie. Real quick before we get going, we are recording this session, and we have a YouTube channel where it is available, where you can find past river management roundtable, and then you can go and look and see what interests you, and you can watch them anytime. We love to see you. Feel free to turn your cameras on, and you can mute your audio unless you're speaking, so we can filter out some of the background noise. Obviously, questions. We have 3 opening presentations, and after each of those presentations, we'll have the opportunity to ask questions for our panelists. And then we'll also have a bit of time, a good 20 minutes or at least, or 30 at the end, to have discussion and talk about these river trails, water trails, and learn from each other. And then, we'll contribute respectfully. We'll be kind to each other. We'll listen, be heard, and speak for yourself and not others, and keep comments concise. So with that, welcome. We're glad you're here. Thanks for joining. And I think the water trails community is very interested in this topic. Last year, we did a survey 1-2-3 poll that was put together by John Wenk out of the Iowa DNR that was identifying water trail issues and challenges. And we had 6 broad categories that we asked people to rank as was most important to them. And this topic today, water trail organizational structures, partnerships, coordination and networking, management and maintenance, was the winner, like out of the ones. So 49 of 73 respondents, so almost 70%, listed among their top 3 issues or challenges, with 30 of those ranking it first. So with that, we're going to welcome our panelists, and each one will introduce themselves and give us a short talk about their organization, their water trail, or what they do to support water trails.
All right, yeah, I'll get started. So I'm Jack Henderson here in Brevard, North Carolina, right outside of Asheville. I'm in the western part of North Carolina, and I work with a nonprofit called Mountain True on the French Broad Paddle Trail. You can advance the slide there. So as you can read there, the French Broad Paddle Trail is a partnership-based program. It's led by a nonprofit that I work for here called Mountain True, but it involves a variety of organizations at the state, local government level, along with the other nonprofits and local businesses and whatnot. And we've been around as a state trail since 1987, but I've been kind of formally doing paddle trail programming as a nonprofit since around 2010, or 2012 rather. I'll kind of get more into the details of what that looks like. But overall, we're a network of unified access points, campsites, signage information, and stewardship along about 140 miles of river here between North Carolina and Tennessee. Slide, please. I'm just going to give some quick visuals of what this river looks like. So as I mentioned, it's about 140 miles between Rosman, North Carolina, which is in southern Transylvania County, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, all the way to Newport. And this is the North Fork of the French Broad here, known for its recreational pursuits, kind of up in the deep headwaters. And you can go to the next slide, please. Then Transylvania County, which is kind of where the river settles out down below, right outside of Brevard. This is near where I live. River's kind of narrow and kind of riffly, really calm and quiet, beautiful for beginners. Next slide, please. And then Henderson County looks kind of similar, kind of wider, but still kind of flat and slow, and still kind of between farm fields and kind of beautiful rural areas. Slide, please. And then Buncombe County, you get into the city of Asheville. It's a little more urbanized. There's greenways and river parks and roads that kind of, speckle across the river in terms of crossing or going alongside. There's a railroad. There's a lot of development, but still a lot of public access and really good recreation to be had. Next slide. And then Madison County, kind of getting into the kind of northern part of the watershed in North Carolina still, is our kind of more whitewater section. So there's commercial rafting, a lot of private kayaking use, commercial outfitters, and a little more public land in the form of national forest land alongside. Next slide. And then Cott County in Tennessee, about 30 miles that extend into the state of Tennessee, whereas the rest of it is in North Carolina. And again, it's really beautiful. It's got a little bit of whitewater. It feels very remote. It's very mountainous. A lot of public land in the form of national forest land, Cherokee National Forest, along through here. Next slide. So, as you might have seen in that first slide there, the French Broad is a North Carolina state trail. In North Carolina, we have a series of state trails that are known for their kind of unified signage and partnerships and management across that. So in North Carolina, we have the French Broad included in that program. And then in Tennessee, a little bit different program, but there's a Tennessee Scenic Rivers program that's administered by the state government as well over there, and the French Broad is included in that. And that's a little more of a kind of like more of a cultural, ecological designation than it is a recreational one, but kind of carries similar protections as a result. Next slide. So I'm just a quick overview of some of the ongoing work that we work on, kind of as a leading nonprofit and as a partnership. We do a variety of things related to communications, and that includes a website online, frenchbroadpaddle.com. We maintain a print map and working on a new one right now. We maintain a variety of unified signage at public access points and campsites and bridges. And then we also work on kind of stewardship and improvement-based projects at public access points. So helping our land manager partners make improvements to existing access points or create new ones. And we also help create and improve riverside campsites, so places where people can stop for the night on a multi-day trip or just utilize them as a rest stop during a day trip. So we do a variety of things related to that. And we also do a lot of kind of on-river consistent stewardship related to river cleanups in terms of removing litter, cutting out trees that are obstructions, hosting events and floats and things like that. So next slide, please. So in terms of our organizational structure, as I mentioned, kind of as you can see highlighted there from that initial slide, the paddle trail as a whole is managed in partnership by government agencies, nonprofits, businesses, and individual volunteers. But Mountain True, which is the nonprofit where I work, is kind of the unifying force for that. We're also the official state partner or the partner for the State Trails program, which means whenever our state government allocates funding or resources for state trail development, we're able to access those funds for our own capacity or to kind of turn out into the community to support community endeavors. So Mountain True, we're a nonprofit organization based in Asheville that focuses on forests, waters, and communities all across the western part of the state. And we also host a variety of riverkeeper programs that kind of advocate for clean, safe, accessible, and scenic waterways through a variety of things. And as a whole, our nonprofit has about 25 full-time staff members with 4 people dedicated here on the French Broad. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all this, but this presentation was talking about partnerships, and I just want to kind of give an overview of who all we work with. We're in 2 different states, 5 counties, 2 different national forests, and then we work with about a dozen different nonprofit organizations, including RMS, which you see there at the bottom, and that list kind of goes from local to state to national. And we're fortunate here in Western NC to have a variety of good local environmental and recreational based nonprofits. That focus here. And I just saw that the question pop up in the chat. So river keepers, as a whole, those are kind of nonprofit quasi-regulatory groups that focus on particular rivers and watersheds. They're kind of the eyes and ears for the river, helping to identify sources of pollution or other infringements to the Clean Water Act. So we're kind of helpful to our state and local regulators in identifying issues and reporting them for the sake of water quality and public access, et cetera. And I can go more into that later on, but I want to be cognizant of time for now. And then going into the government agency side, we work a lot with all forms of county, local, state agencies and organizations that have different roles in terms of owning and managing properties, to regulating water, to providing opportunities for funding, et cetera. Next slide. And then also, in addition to local governments and nonprofits, we also work a lot with local businesses, and you can kind of get a sense there for county by county. There's all kinds of different outfitters and retailers that support programming on the river in a variety of different ways. Next slide. And so in practice, just to give a couple examples, and we'll get more into this in the Q&A side of things, but on the nonprofit side, we partner a lot with local nonprofits on acquisitions. So we have a pretty robust community of land trusts in this area, that organizations that can own property for the sake of public access or conservation, and we work with them to allocate funding that we have access to within our role with the paddle trail, but we can't necessarily own property, or we don't own property, but we can work with people that do to support their work. We also work with other kind of more stewardship-based groups to do cleanups and recreational floats. We work with other kind of more advocacy and lobbying-based organizations to advocate for the river and advocate for more resources to do stuff. And we all kind of work together on events. Government agencies, we have a lot of formal agreements to help kind of create and maintain and improve river access points. So where a local government might own a site but doesn't have the capacity to steward it themselves, we'll help out with that through formal agreements. And we'll also help, kind of provide input on new existing opportunities in terms of developing sites. And then local businesses will partner with on events and, hire for certain things like shuttles or event space or buying equipment, things like that. And then those groups are also really helpful in terms of donating items for events like raffles and whatnot, or fundraisers and that kind of stuff. And so that in a nutshell is the French Broad Paddle Trail as a collection of partnerships working together, and I'll pass it on to the next person. Thanks.
Okay, I was just pausing in case anyone had questions.
Yeah, if anybody wants to throw a question or two or put them in the chat, feel free to do that. And then again, we'll have plenty of time at the end to circle back and talk about all these organizations. But if you have something specific for Jack, it'd be a good time to hop in now.
I do see a around the Riverkeeper topic, and I'll just say to Lawrence, I think who asked that question, that Mountain True, we host 4 different Riverkeeper programs, one on the French Broad, but also one on the Watauga, Green, and Broad rivers and other Western NC areas. And in terms of getting one of those programs started, there's a kind of overarching umbrella organization called the Waterkeeper Alliance, and they have a good website that kind of talks through how those programs can get started. So I encourage you to check out that website first, and then feel free to follow up with other questions.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Sarah Hippensteel Hall. I'm the manager of outreach, stewardship, and communications at the Miami Conservancy District. That is not in Florida. We are in Southwest Ohio along the Great Miami River, and we are a regional government agency that has been around since 1915. So we are 110 years old this year. And we were created after the Great Flood of 1913 to have a 3-pronged mission: keep our communities safe from high water along the river system in Southwest Ohio. We have a robust water quality and quantity water stewardship program that focuses on the health of both rivers and our aquifer. And we believe strongly that people are more likely to care for their rivers if they consider them enjoyable, fun, active, and exciting. So we do a lot of recreation. We build both bike trails, and of course, today I'm going to talk about our involvement with our water trails. So that's where we're located. Next slide, please. So if you're familiar with Ohio, we are in the southwest corner. Dayton is kind of our epicenter. That's where my office is, but I work across 15 counties. And the green blob, as I like to call it, is basically everything that drains to the Great Miami River itself. And then we enter the Ohio River west of Cincinnati in the corner of the state. So that's where we are. There are 3 main rivers in our drainage area, and then we have 3 big creeks that are also considered very great for recreation, paddling. So my water trail consists of this entire system, those 6 waterways together. Next slide, please. I just want to start with, we were not thinking we would build a water trail. I've always thought that the water trail existed here regardless. We just needed to put a map together and tell people where they could safely and legally enter the river. And we actually had a number of drownings one summer from people who unfortunately got too close to some of our low-head dams. And we felt strongly that we were the agency that could push out maps and tell people how to safely have fun on this river. So it really started with maps. And the river access was already there. We have dozens of great park districts and other governments that, public entities that manage legal access to the rivers and streams. And we just needed to put all of that in one place to be helpful for our river users. We're fortunate, and this is different from a lot of other places, we don't have any private landowner agreements. We don't need them. There might be just a couple historic ones on our Mad River, but for the most part, we have enough regular, it's not that we couldn't have more, but we have regular public access throughout this entire system. So we just wanted to make sure that people knew where that was. We also not only wanted to keep people safe, but we wanted to make sure that they were not trespassing. So you cannot just paddle down the river and suddenly pitch a tent, and even though it looks like it's remote, it's actually a farmer who is going to be maybe not happy that you're pitching your tent there. So it was really also about encouraging more recreation, but keeping our landowners feeling that we weren't sending people out to their private lands. So we started with the Great Miami River and then the Stillwater, the Mad. I'll talk about the special things about each one of these rivers and why it makes a really great water trail system. And then we also got a grant to, the state helped us with some of the original printing of both these maps and signs, so that we give our partners these signs for free, and they install them where they feel they are necessary. So as the water trail manager, we're not managing each access site ourselves. That would be impossible. But we are working with a whole host of partners so that it's properly signed and we're all working together. Okay, next slide. So this is not only did we rely heavily on our local park districts, but we work closely with the state of Ohio. Also outfitters, anglers who have been out there and know every inch of the rivers and streams. I regularly call on some of them to help me with information about some of our streams and rivers. Water quality experts, because while we have some of the healthiest rivers in Ohio, and I would argue some of the healthiest rivers in the Midwest, there are areas where we needed to exercise some caution with our river users. We have 26 colleges and universities in that green blob, our watershed, and they have 225,000 college students. That's our future workforce, and we don't want them to leave after graduation. So we want to build relationships with not only these colleges, but these students, so that they'll stay after graduation and be our next generation of people who live, work, and play here. And then other groups that I'm sure a lot of you work with. We also, I would have to just say this, these maps were done by hand for many, many years by an awesome designer. He's now retired. I don't know actually how I'm gonna do this next one without him, but he was incredibly patient, especially in the early years where we were making hundreds of changes every single time we called him, to make sure that every inch of these maps is absolutely correct, so that when a river user goes out there, they're not going on the wrong property or they're stumbling into a safety problem. So one of the things that I would say is every single time I update these maps, I literally visit every single public access site myself. along with someone who drives while I take notes, and we make sure that the maps are correct when we print them. We are also now doing online maps, but many people want the waterproof paper maps to take with them. So we're probably never going to be able to get rid of one or the other. Okay, next slide, please. I think I only have one more slide after this, but this was an infographic that we did after we were fortunate enough to get a national designation for our water trail. We became a state water trail in 2007, I think. And the only reason we weren't the first and a lot earlier than that is because in the beginning of the state's water trail program, they wanted us to sign a contract saying we would pick up every single piece of trash on all 291 miles of rivers and streams, and we refused because that would be impossible. And so we said, fine, we don't need your designation to be a water trail. We're calling ourselves a water trail now. And we printed the maps for many years with just local funds and donations. But then we finally got our state designation, and then we applied for national designation because I thought, why not? Let's do this. We are awesome. This is me talking. We're awesome. We're going to try to get this designation. And you know what? With this great partnership that we have with all of these other park districts, we're fortunate that the National Park Service agreed with us too. And I've been told, we didn't get it in writing, but I was told that we were an exemplary application. So I'm holding that close to my heart. These are all the awesome things about our rivers. We have whitewater kayaking, which is pretty unusual for Ohio or the Midwest. So we definitely draw people to that. We have river surfing right in front of my office. There's surfing almost year round. There's some crazy people who do it throughout the winter. We are some of the best smallmouth bass fishery in Ohio and probably the Midwest. And people do come all over to also fish for trout on the Mad River. It's a cold water fishery. So we have world-class fishing, which is really important for our river users. And then you can see all of the other fun things. We also have these great little riverfront towns that have used this river to develop a travel and tourism brand called the Great Miami Riverway. We don't have mountains, we don't have an ocean, we have this river. And so we've spent a lot of time telling the story about how awesome our cities and our corridor is and what fun things to do are here. So next slide. So these are just my lessons learned. This is about if you ever want to pursue a designation or even just start calling your your river a water trail. I really don't think it takes more than just getting some people together enthusiastic who love your river and want to make it a place to brag about. And yes, we do lots of other stuff. That bottom picture is actually a trout in the classroom where they're releasing baby trout after they've raised them all year in the classroom. There's a group of people going through one of our whitewater features. You know, it's just one of the first things we did, I would say, is not only we printed those maps, we just started taking people on the river and people who'd never been out there before to change their minds and their perspective. So that's my water trail story. And I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. It's awesome. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to come off mute and ask questions, or we can wait and have a larger discussion after Christine goes.
Well, I'll ask my question. This is Lelia. Hi, everybody. Sarah, how often do you reprint your maps? How often do you feel a need to?
That's a really good question. The Great Miami River gets reprinted more often than the other two because I go through about 10,000 of those a year. So I would say every 2 to 3 years, they get if I run out in a year, I'll just reprint. But after 2 years, inevitably access points have changed. So 2 to 3 years, the Mad and the Stillwater probably a little bit longer than that because we don't go through as many maps. We just debuted an electronic version of our water trail map over this winter. We had an old one. Anyway, now we have a new one. And I'm wondering if that'll change how many maps we distribute. But but it may not. I don't know. We'll go to a fishing expo or something like that, and we'll give out 3,000 in one day. So that's my
I've got a
long
question.
answer.
This is Larry Freilich in Inyo County in California. We've got a water trail that we've been planning now for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And we're being held up by a lease to be able to use land for a put in and take out. I kind of love the idea of just start, getting people out in the river with or without infrastructure. It almost seems like something to do, but I worry a little bit about liability. How do you deal with that?
Well, we don't, we don't put anything on our maps that needs a landowner agreement. That's just the way we operate. I know other rivers have to rely heavily on that. So that's just one thing that, I'm lucky about. I would say anything that's fishy, for example, an outfitter that I think there's a rumor that they might not be in business or something like that, I don't put it on. That's the beauty of the electronic map, is I'll be able to put on and take things off a lot more quickly. On the paper map, we're really, really strict about, it has to be owned by a park district. It has to be a state, DNR play. It has to be something I know for sure is not going to change overnight.
Thank you very much. That's good information.
Larry, I'll just add one thing. Just on the other end of that spectrum, like I definitely agree with all that's been said about the legitimacy of sites. But most states also have what's called recreational use statutes, which significantly lessen the amount of liability that a private landowner has in the face of free and public access. So if the landowner isn't charging a fee, and it's not municipally owned, like they're probably not liable for a whole lot, and they might be comfortable with some initial passive access, the other points, like you might be careful around that in terms of like long-term viability, but for just kind of getting started, it could be an option.
I think that's a good point, Jack, because Ohio does have that, as a landowner on a big stream myself, if somebody gets out of their kayak and twists their ankle on my property, I'm not, liable for that. So in Ohio, we definitely, landowners can fall back on that. The other thing is there's case law around paddler safety and you having to get out and portage something, and you are not trespassing if you are getting out to portage around something that's unsafe. So there are some public trust law that keep paddlers safe and also landowners safe.
Let me add to that too. I know in Georgia, we're actually going through a lot right now. There's some legislation out there that about what specifically is a recreational water. And so some, the property line runs through the center of a creek or a stream. And some of that is being threatened to be taken away from actually being of public use, and not being able to even portage on those properties, is my understanding. So there's an ongoing battle with some of that. In Georgia, which is why I think what Sarah was mentioning about what you're putting it on a map and putting it out there for public consumption. If you don't have the property owner agreement, then just do not stick it on there whatsoever. Is probably the safest bet.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Christina. You have the floor. We'll just let you go ahead and we'll roll on.
All right, great. All right, well, my name is Christine Hassel. I am project manager at the Trust for Public Land, working in the great state of Georgia. And my the focus of my work is on the Chattahoochee River, which is we together with the Chattahoochee team, we are focused on 285 miles of the Chattahoochee River from the headwaters in Helen, Georgia, which is in the North Georgia mountains, through the metropolitan area, past the city of Atlanta and down to Columbus, Georgia, where it becomes the Georgia Alabama border and runs all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. So we are focused just on the miles of river in the state of Georgia. And about, gosh, what's it, 2025. So about 7 years ago, we started a really robust public engagement process to determine what the region, the relationship this region wants to have with the Chattahoochee River, with its river, which is what I'm going to dig into a little bit, and then all of the partnerships about that. But first, next slide, please. Trust for Public Land, we are a national nonprofit organization. We got our start a little over 50 years ago now with in land acquisition. We do not hold land. We turn it over to state, local governments, National Park Service, but we always have a takeout partner and make sure that that land is held in perpetuity as public land. So that's really how we got to our start. But our focus and our mission is really to connect everyone to the outdoors. We know that people are healthier and happier when they're connected to trails, green space, parks, you name it. But when they're able to be outside, health and well-being is an immediate benefit and an increase. So we focus much more on connecting people to the outdoors. Next slide, please, James. Over our more than 50 years, we have completed well over 5,000 projects, parks, trails, schoolyards, all these outdoor places to connect more people to the outdoors. We've generated over $9 billion in public funding and created access to over 400 million acres of public lands. Next slide, please. In Georgia, our office was planted about 30 years ago with a focus on the Chattahoochee River. The Chattahoochee was named the most polluted river, an endangered river in the nation, by American Rivers, and that really started a big focus on how we can help the health and well-being of these communities in the river by focusing on the Chattahoochee. We've also done a lot of other work in Georgia over our 30+ years being here. Next slide, please. But I have the great joy of focusing primarily on the Chattahoochee River, which Georgia is my home. I was born and raised here, so it's great to be able to be focusing my professional life on this river that I used to recreate. I grew up recreating on this river. In order to launch this big, public engagement effort 7 years ago, the director of the Chattahoochee program, Walt Ray, started talking to different partners, so different local governments and agencies about what were they working on along the river. Were there trails? Were there parks? Were there access? And all the conversations he had were usually pointing him in a different direction. You need to talk to so-and-so also, and you need to talk to this person over here in that county. Go talk to Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area. So Walt started convening what we call the Chattahoochee Working Group. And they have been meeting ever since on a monthly basis for 7 years. It is a group that represents now over 80 nonprofit organizations, planning groups and government agencies, and all with a focus on the Chattahoochee River. Next slide, please. This is just a list of some of the participating organizations. This was our 2020 engagement. So a lot of different organizations, all stakeholders with focus on the Chattahoochee River, touching this river and its communities in some way. Next slide, please. So with Atlanta Regional Commission, Trust for Public Land, Cobb County, and the City of Atlanta, who are historically two agencies that did not work well together, the two government agencies, Cobb County and City of Atlanta, the border between them is the Chattahoochee River. There are not very many bridges across it. But all of these organizations came together to focus on a 100-mile vision for the Chattahoochee River, starting at at Buford Dam, which is the bottom of Lake Lanier, which is a reservoir for the metropolitan area, down to Chattahoochee Bend State Park. And it really captures the biggest impact of users along the river in that area. Next slide, please. We did 2 years of public engagement and came up with the Chattahoochee Riverlands. Next slide, please. And as a study, as I said, talks about the 100 miles of the Chattahoochee River. So a public realm, linear parks, trails, water trails, everything that you can imagine along this corridor. The bottom right, I just want to draw your attention to the bottom right of this slide. That is the Chattahoochee River Basin. So the headwaters on the top side up in Helen, Georgia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And then it runs all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And our 100-mile Riverland study focused on that little orange piece in the middle. Next slide, please, James. So as I mentioned, the Chattahoochee Riverlands is what we refer to as this vision. It is the greenway. So the trails along the river, sometimes one side of the river, sometimes the other, sometimes both sides, and the destinations along the way. The Blue Ray Trail, which is the water access points and the river itself. The tributary trails, which are the trails that get people from where they live and where they work to the river to play. And so the Riverlands is all of those components. We also came up with 4 project goals. Next slide, please, James. A safe connected corridor, a common ground for all, an ecological refuge for the region, and a living legacy for future generations. And this guides all of the decisions that are made in this Chattahoochee Riverlands corridor. And I will say this was adopted or was published in 2020 and has been adopted. And we have a lot of really great agencies along the rivers. This runs through 20 cities and 7 counties who have just sort of taken this vision and they have been running with it. Next slide, please, James. And then we have some others that, some other jurisdictions that we focus on a little bit deeper. So this is just sort of the numbers, 25 river crossings. Sarah, I will say, I noticed you had a lot of access points for your Miami River. We do not have that many on the Chattahoochee. So this actually creates a lot more access points along the way proposed. Next slide, please, that you can see here. So 42 water access points, and I think this is actually double of what is existing in this corridor. Next slide, please, James. And then so since the study was published in 2020, we have been able to track over $267 million committed and invested in the Riverlands projects. These are our last year's numbers too. So we haven't captured some of the new things that are already taking off this year. But a lot of things happening along the way. Again, the top right is Lake Lanier. So Buford Dam is right at the bottom of that, which starts the Chattahoochee Riverlands segment, and then runs about 100 miles, river miles south to Chattahoochee Bend State Park. Next slide, please, James. And since then, we've been off to the races. So we have a pilot project, which we call a Cobb Showcase project. It's in Cobb County, South Cobb, right along the river, of course, across from the city of Atlanta. It's a 2.7 miles of trails, river access, 2 new parks, providing access to the river, a new boat ramp, fully accessible kayak launch. Again, part of those goals, we want everybody to be able to have access. So all of our decisions take into account making sure that everybody can have access. So we are dedicated to some accessible kayak launches. Keep going, if you will. And this is just the map of where it starts. So on your right, there is a little road that sort of squiggles down, a white road that squiggles down. That is sort of the northern end of the Cobb Showcase site. And it runs to sort of the a bit north of the middle of the screen. Keep going, James. This project will open next year. Very excited about that. The Chattahoochee Camp and Paddle Trail is actually opening this month. Next slide, please. This is the first paddle and camp trail in the Chattahoochee River in the state of Georgia. It runs from the city of Atlanta at Standing Peachtree Green Space to McIntosh Reserve in Carroll County. This is connects 48 miles, river miles, with a 3-night, 4-day experience. So the first of its kind in Georgia, on the Chattahoochee. It's a terrific experience that again is opening up a little later this month. And with that, we have added 2 new kayak launches to the Chattahoochee River. One at Standing Peachtree, like I said, it's city of Atlanta. This is the first access to the Chattahoochee River for Atlanta residents, first public access. It opened actually in December of last year and is already seeing really great use, which is sure to increase as the weather turns nicer. And then the rest of our sites are opening up this month. This has been a big project involving about 5 different jurisdictions. And then some of our other partners include Georgia Rivers, Spurs Georgia Trees Atlanta, and Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, to name a few. If you will continue, James. And then part of Trust for Public Lands mission is dedicated to ensuring that people have access to the outdoors. As I mentioned earlier, since we published the study of the Riverlands in 2020, we have a lot of government agencies and organizations that are running. You know, they are well funded, they have access to the water, they have property along the river, and they are able to just go and run with it. Trust for Public Land is currently focused on 20 miles of the Riverlands from city of Atlanta south. And this is the area where there's just not a lot of access. If you're not familiar with the Chattahoochee, it has similar features to what Jack shared the French Broad River has, where you've got some rapids, you've got some wider, slower areas. It runs through some agrarian, farmlands south of the city. But this area is really sort of that gritty urban corridor, and there is not very much access to the river. It's very industrialized, and historically, folks have turned their back on this river. There are a lot of folks who don't even know where the Chattahoochee River is, and they could be standing, 50 feet or less away. So we're really focused on opening up this 20-mile section of the river and really being able to get people out and on the river. I will also say north of city of Atlanta, the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area is run by the National Park Service. They have a really great outfit up there. They have about, I don't know the acreage anymore, over 18,000 acres, I believe. They have a lot of waterfront access. They do not have any overnight camp along the river. And it is, as I said, managed by National Park Service. So trails, some access points. There's a lot of tubing, paddling, kayaking that happens north of the city. A little bit farther north, there is access for rowing. So Georgia Tech is a university in the heart of Atlanta. Their crew team actually has to travel north of the city and be able to access the river and row. This section of the river that is on this map as well, I will say, is very channelized, so access is very complicated as well. But next slide, I think that may be my last one. Yeah, that's it. We have a lot of great things happening along the Chattahoochee River. A ton of partners that are working together to make things happen along the river and really open it up as a water trail, which it is not yet. A portion of the Chattahoochee is a national water trail. It runs through the CRNRA that the National Park Service manages. But we're hoping to get some more designated water trail along the Chattahoochee. So I will pause, and I think we can open up for questions.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. Yeah, we have about 15 minutes left for discussion. I have some questions that I came up with, but I think it's really important and it'd be a really good time for folks to discuss your questions and see what y'all can pick each other's brains and find out about. So it looks like we've got Lisa, if you want to go first.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, panelists. That was super interesting. And so my question is, I think for any or all of you to respond as
Yeah, ma'am, if you can go ahead and verify that 16-digit card number as you do see it on your end here.
so I think there's some background noise from Risa. Maybe you could mute your phone. So my question is regarding recreation use impacts. So like impacts from recreation overuse. I'm wondering if any of the panelists could speak to ways in which having a water trail designation or has been beneficial or helpful in mitigating existing impacts and or preventing recreation impacts from happening in the future or from getting to a point where they're problematic.
Lisa, I can take a first stab at that. Good to see you. So on our end, we don't have a national water trail designation, but we do have a state trail designation. And while the state trail designation itself might not carry a whole lot of weight, it might, but we don't necessarily use it that way. What does carry a punch in terms of what you're talking about is user numbers. So we've done a pretty decent job of trying to track use numbers of paddlers along the river, kind of county by county and different designations along the way. And that's been helpful to kind of show the impact in a positive sense in terms of potential improvements and amenities and whatnot. But it's also been helpful to show potential negative impacts, from additional pollution sources and permits and whatnot. So showing the potential human health impact or negativity has been helpful to communicate against some of that stuff. So I guess my take home point is encouraging, if you're doing water trail programming, if and where possible, try to track user numbers to kind of get a sense for positive and negative impacts.
I would just chime in that we have some areas that are highly used. The people who travel in, and this is a generalization, but the people who travel in from a distance are usually not the ones who are causing some of the issues. We get dumping trash from local use, kids, whatever. But it varies by site to site. Some areas are more popular for that than others. Sometimes it's because they're a little bit off the beaten path and you can, you're away from the road or something. And so each of our access point managers, whether it be a park district or, a township, they're dealing with that on a case by case basis. There are a handful that are really serious problems, and we've tried all the things. Cameras, fake cameras, extra patrols, a dumpster, no dumpster. It is a highly, it's really well used. So there's people there all the time. That doesn't seem to mitigate it. So there are a couple places that just are problem areas, and we haven't solved that. I would say in general, the more use we get in an area, it usually then solves some of the trash being left behind or misuse or vandalism. Usually when we increase traffic, that solves that problem. But there are at least two places I can think of where the opposite is happening. So There's no easy answer.
And I can echo, I mean, really all of that. So we have been trying to, part of the organizations that we partner with to get people access to the river is really to start to build that stewardship. You know, we have large segments of the Chattahoochee that nobody really accesses. I mean, it's impossible to get to or really very complicated to get to. You don't know where to get out because there's no signage. And you could end up 20 miles on the river before there's even a takeout or more. So we're actively working to get more people out on the river, again, to build that stewardship. We have, for folks who don't paddle or are not comfortable in a boat or on the water, we even host invasive species removals day and planting work days where we're planting back native species, wetland restoration, all of these things where we really invite people out. And that's when we get to talk to folks about what it means to protect this river, what a resource it is for, not just for recreation too, right? I mean, there are ecologies at stake here when the rivers are misused. So, you know, we really try to highlight and draw the attention to all of the wonderful things that these, you know, the stewardship can really bring. And we've seen success in that, but 100% it is about having sites that people are using. I mean, we have neighbors and friends of parks groups that focus on some of the park sites that are along the river. And they will catch a lot of vandalism or have been able to stop a lot of it. But I will say, with the few access points that are located in the Chattahoochee, a lot of the misuse comes from an abundance of people in a very small area trying to access the river. So you get those like the man-made kayak slips where people just run their kayak straight down the side of the bank, which, you know, is not a terrific practice. And just a flood of folks just misusing even river access. But great question.
Yeah, super. Thank you. Maybe I could ask just a super quick follow-up. Jack, good to see you as well. Look forward to seeing you here very soon at RMS Symposium. But I'm wondering if you could just speak really quickly to when you have tracked your user numbers, has that given you any insights into use patterns, like where use is increasing or decreasing, where you might want to invest more or less in X, Y, or Z, access points, those types of decisions? Love to hear more about that, if you can talk to that quickly.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We've done kind of two levels of user surveys per se, or visitor use surveying, and one of which is kind of more of a passive survey to where we're just observing numbers, whether that's through, you know, we typically work with like a local university or a planning firm to kind of do that automatically, whether it's through cameras or, you know, traffic strips or automated counting, to kind of just get a sense for who's using what and how frequently. Then we'll also do a little bit of kind of more active surveys where we're asking people where they're from, you know, if they're spending money, etc. The latter is, or what their perception of the access points are as well. And the latter is like really helpful for getting like a better snapshot of people's experiences and kind of what their impacts are in a positive sense in terms of tourism dollars or otherwise, and kind of what their perception of those sites are in terms of where things need to be improved. That's a lot harder to do just on like a longer scale. It's just expensive and challenging to like do that, you know, for a whole year or a whole season or whatever. So we'll do that here and there to get an idea, especially kind of right around like a particular project. If we're like working with like a county on a particular set of access points, trying to plan improvements, we'll like do that particular, you know, handful of access points versus like all 35 or something. But the more passive monitoring we'll try to do more often, like every other year, every 5 years, to kind of get a snapshot for what's improving, or sorry, what's where we're seeing more or less use, and stuff like that. And we'll try to also split it up by private use versus outfitted use. That's helpful to get a sense for. Like, our outfitters are really helpful about providing their numbers, so we can kind of synthesize that with the private boater users, not non-commercial users, and having that split's been helpful as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is Larry again for the Owens River Water Trail. We are just starting out, and one of the things I was hoping to get, and maybe we can follow up with one of the presenters, is just the administration. We're not as advanced as any of you. We're just starting out, and the idea of a working group makes so much sense in our case. But the administration of that and getting the partners together, we're at such a starting point. We'd love to get some advice. So if any of you are interested in helping us trying to figure out how to pull that together, that would be great.
Larry, I've got 4 letters for you. RTCA. I'm not sure if they're still around with all the federal cuts that's going on right now, but the National Park Service's Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program does exactly that. They're really good about bringing together stakeholders and partners in an area where there's not a convening source to do that. And I see in the chat that they are still here, which is great. But they do that work, and you can apply to them to kind of have a convener come out and help out with stuff. And maybe Lilia, sorry, can speak more towards the presence of them in California, but it's a great resource.
Yeah, that's great. And Julie Bell, if you can put a link to your website, that'd be great. Thanks.
Hi, Larry. This is Lilia. I work with Julie. I put that link in there right below Julie's comment. So yes, we often help with creating water trail groups and helping them get going. We also help administer the National Water Trail System. And happy to talk to the woman who was interested in perhaps applying. We'll wait and see if the trails that applied this year get designated in June.
Fantastic. Thank you.
They did not get awarded for 4 years from 2017 to 21 or whatever those years were. You can do the math there and make the correlation. Anyhow, there's lots of great examples of water trails across the country, and currently there's 37 national water trails, including Sarah's and the Chattahoochee from Atlanta north for 48 miles. So above what TPL's working on, which is awesome.
All right, we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody wants to have a quick go at the panelists and learn something? And if not, if I would have the panelists put their emails, maybe if you're willing to give them out in the chat, so that if anybody wants to reach out to you, they can without having to try to dig up the big opening slide. And with that, we also want to thank all of you for joining. We want to thank our panelists. It's really informative. It's really great to hear folks talking about water trails and the creation of these access points and opportunities for folks to get out on the river and for ecology and all the other stuff that goes along with our wonderful rivers. We want to remind everyone that you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can see all the old management roundtables, and the river management roundtable for this month will be up shortly. So you'll be able to see that and share that as you wish.
And thank you for putting this together.
Oh yeah, it was a pleasure.
Thanks, James.
Fun to get to talk to everybody and all the river folks. And we hope to do some more of them along the line, either within the Water Trails Working Group or as future roundtables where we tackle the other 5 topics that were really important to everyone. So there's really sort of a starting point, and keep your eye open. And I might even come ask some of y'all to help on future panels. And so with that, remind you, we have our symposium coming up April 8th to 10th in Ashland, Oregon, Restoring Rivers for a Resilient Future. It's going to be really great. And I hope that I'll see some of the Water Trails folks, and maybe we can even have a little Water Trails get together. It would be awesome. Other than that, we have our RMS Wild and Scenic River webinar series coming up March, May, and June. So you might want to be interested in those or spread that around to people that would be interested in that. We would love to have as many folks as possible join. And Risa, if you don't mind, throw in the link to the survey, and so you can share your thoughts on our roundtables. how we can improve them, what we're doing right, and how we can continue moving forward with our stuff. And with that, we are just about at the bottom of the hour. And so again, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you'll have a really great rest of your day.